All right. So can you please confirm, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Yes.
You can hear very well.
All right. Thank you. So good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and greeting from Karachi, Pakistan. And first of all, I would like to thank Professor Mohammed Al-Burai and the conference secretariat for giving me this opportunity to speak on this forum. And I'm glad to see all faculty members and including Professor Ibrahim Mustafa, who's been our mentor and a very good a supervisor for me as well, and a very inspirational faculty for me, and I've learned a lot from him. So thank you very much. So ladies and gentlemen, so advances when I'm making the presentation, so I realized that the topic is very broad, and it itself, it includes like it may take an hour to address the entire spectrum of advances in the vascular liver diseases. So what I thought that I can focus on advances in the portal vein thrombosis, which is an entity in the same paradigm which we actually encounter almost all of the gastroenterologists and hepatologists they see in routine practices, and this is something we actually may update our knowledge and can revise this topic. I don't have any conflict of interest to declare. So in next 15 minutes, I'll be talking about various facts about portal vein thrombosis in patients with cirrhosis, without cirrhosis, and I'll be discussing various management strategies in both situations. So let me to take you through the case, which is a case of 40-year-old gentleman who evaluated for a new onset ascites and diagnosed to have hepatitis C related cirrhosis, portal ascites and portal vein thrombosis on ultrasound. There was no history of abdominal pain. His triphasic abdominal CT scan was done, which revealed presence of cirrhosis, dilated portal veins, and the thrombosis of portal vein. There was a splenomegaly. There was no hepatocellular carcinoma. So now the question is, this patient who presented with portal vein thrombosis, diagnosed on arrival, didn't had any history of abdominal pain, but having an ascites, hep C cirrhosis, what should be the management plan for this patient other than treating for ascites and hepatitis C? So you will be getting the answers about this question during my presentation. So what about the portal hypertension, portal vein thrombosis? This is an heterogeneous condition with respect to etiology, manifestation, natural history, and various therapeutic options. And the problem is that the terminology and the classification system is actually very extensively, despite the fact that lots of classification systems has been available so far. So the management of our patient as well as similar patient who are presenting to you is actually depends on many factors, which includes the standardized documentation of initial site, extent, the degree of luminal obstruction, the chronicity of the clot formation to make an objective serial assessment of a spontaneous regression or the treatment response. So it all depends on many factors as I talk about. So in terms of time course, we define it as a recent portal vein thrombosis when it is presumed to be present for less than 6 months. We entitle as a chronic one when it is actually presenting or persistent for more than 6 months. And this criteria is actually defined based upon many studies where where it has been found that the recanalization that did not take place within 6 months, it did not occur between 16 to 12 months. And the cavernous transformation is actually developed in most of such patients, hence it defines as actually the chronicity. So what is the cavernous transformation? Just a reminder for our PGs and trainees, if they're present over here, this is a gross portal collaterals without original portal vein seen, and this actually defines the chronicity of the portal vein thrombosis. So this PVTs actually can develop at the multiple site. For instance, it may develop at intrahepatic branches of the portal vein. It may involve the main portal vein or the tributaries, including the splenic vein or the mesenteric vein. It can involve intrahepatic or extrahepatic part of this portal venous system. And then again, the percentage of occlusion is actually also defined about the disease characteristic. For instance, if this is 100% of the lumen of the vessel is informed, then we call it completely occlusive. The partially occlusive when the clot is obstructing more than 50% of the original vessel lumen, and the minimally occlusive when the clot is obstructing less than 50% of original vessel lumen. So all of these factors is actually has itself is actually having an importance when we do manage this patient. So what about the various classifications? So the various classifications so far are available, but these are carrying multiple limitations. For instance, these are like very heterogeneous classification systems, and majority of these systems were actually developed exclusively in liver transplant population, and the clinical outcome correlations are mostly limited to short-term liver transplant recovery and the survival. However, the long-term outcome data are also lacking in non-transplant recipient. But let's see what are these classification systems. So these are the various classification systems which mainly describe this condition based upon anatomical characteristics, and few of them is actually include the anatomical characteristics as well as the degree of exclusion. And all classification is actually having some strength and some weaknesses, and many of them is actually has taken into account an outcome correlation, for example, a post-transplant survival, impact on a post-transplant survival, but many of them is actually haven't studied and haven't reviewed the impact on any outcome. So the most recent one are these two, which includes the serine classification and Bengoy classification, which actually includes the anatomical degree of exclusion, occlusion, duration, and the presence of underlying chronic liver disease. But again, they are having itself is like a certain limitation, including being more complex, especially in case of serine classification. So how common is this? So the portal vein thrombosis can present in the presence of cirrhosis and in the absence of cirrhosis. So when it is actually present in the presence of cirrhosis, it is overall is actually manifest in up to 9% of cases. And based upon the hospital registries, the prevalence is actually ranges between 1.3 to 9.8%. So in patients with cirrhosis, now the question is who is at a risk to develop portal vein thrombosis in the presence of cirrhosis. So the multiple factor has been studied, but the more relevant include the severity of underlying portal hypertension and the liver disease. These are the major predictive factors for the portal vein thrombosis and the cirrhosis. The decreased velocity of the portal vein flow, especially if it is actually ranging between 10 to 15, the use of non-selective beta blockers, obesity, presence of metabolic syndrome, and NASH, these were found as an independent risk factors associated with these conditions.
يا أمنة
So here the
يا أمنة أنا علمناكي كده يا أمنة بسرعة كده. أمنة, we will learn you not to speak too much. You are speak very quickly, huh?
Okay, all right.
This is what you already spent was us 2 years, huh?
All right. So okay, let me get.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. So whenever this condition is actually present and there is a presence of portal vein thrombosis, so you need to look for whether there is an underlying factor which is leading to this thrombosis or not. In general, there is some risk factor which is present, but it has been reported that a detailed workup for thrombophilia in patients with cirrhosis is not generally recommended unless there are patients where the family history or routine laboratory testing series raises these concerns. However, you need to remember that hepatocellular carcinoma, this is one condition where these patients can present with portal vein thrombosis. So always look for the presence of malignancy in such patients when they are presenting with cirrhosis, especially for hepatocellular carcinoma. So the patient without cirrhosis, this is relatively uncommon condition and it can manifest in 0.05% of cases. And if these patients are presenting whether with main portal vein involvement or hepatic vein involvement, they are carrying actually the same risk factors. And here you need to work them up for underlying hypercoagulable state. And what are the hypercoagulable state which you need to evaluate them for? It includes the myeloproliferative disorders, antiphospholipid syndromes, paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobin urea, protein C, protein S deficiency, factor Leiden 5 disease, factor 2 disease mutation, antithrombin 3 deficiency, and the presence of some other systemic diseases, including the celiac disease. So again, few other factors, for example, the use of certain medications like oral contraceptive and the presence of the pregnancy has been reported to be an underlying risk factor, and one can try to identify any underlying risk factor which is leading to this portal vein thrombosis in the absence of cirrhosis. So if you think about these hypercoagulable states, what are the workup you will be needing and when you can actually offer? For example, you can think about myeloproliferative disorders when it is actually presented with portal vein or hepatic vein thrombosis in the absence of any major provoking factor. And here you can check for JAK2 mutation and V617F mutation because this is the most commonest one. In other cases, you can look for CLAIR mutation for antiphospholipid antibody syndrome, lupus anticoagulation, and other underlying hypercoagulable conditions. So now this is important to remember that heritable thrombophilia condition, for example, protein CS deficiency, they might be present at the baseline on presentation, but because of the presence of underlying cirrhosis, the checking them on presentation might not give you an accurate result. So that's why these are not recommended to check the level of these tests whenever somebody is presenting with acute thrombosis. So does it influence the mortality? It has some influence, especially if somebody is actually having a liver transplant, underwent for liver transplantation. And here, the presence of portal vein thrombosis at the time of liver transplant has been reported to be associated with increased post-transplant mortality. Outside of the liver transplant candidates, no major impact has been reported on the disease prognosis and the mortality. So what could be the goal of therapy and the rationale for the therapy in both situations? So the rationale for the therapy are relatively different in the cases where the cirrhosis is present and in the absence of cirrhosis. For instance, people who are presented without cirrhosis, here the aim of the therapy is to prevent thrombus extension into the mesenteric vein, to prevent pre-complication of interstitial ischemia, and to achieve recanalization to prevent the development of portal hypertension and its complication. On the other hand, in case of in the patients who are already having cirrhosis, remember there is already a portal hypertension present. So here your aim to start the treatment is to avoid thrombosis progression because that may hinder a future liver transplantation or to cause a progression of portal hypertension and avoiding ischemia. So the existing clinical trial data are weak regarding the treatment indication in the absence of ischemic symptoms in this group of patients. So this is something which is like really important to remember, and I'll be addressing it again. So how to treat them? So for instance, somebody who's presenting without cirrhosis, but with portal vein thrombosis, then you need to look for one major factor, whether there are any sign or symptoms of intestinal ischemia present or not. Because if there is an ongoing intestinal ischemia, then an organ may get lost. So you need to salvage the organ. And for that, early decision and early start of anticoagulation will be essential. So look for them. If there is any element of intestinal ischemia, if there is an evidence, consider anticoagulation right from the beginning, involve surgeon, VIR, and hematology so that other than anticoagulation, if you need some acute management, you can decide about it. So if this is an acute or recent portal vein thrombosis, no sign and symptoms of major organ ischemia, then you can go for direct antithrombotic therapy. So the diagnosis of thrombophilic conditions or the hematological malignancies is much more likely as an underlying risk factor for this group of patient. Here, you need to send the workup to identify an underlying risk factor. But if somebody is actually presenting with portal vein thrombosis in the presence of cirrhosis, then your strategy will be different. So look for the presence of ischemia. If there is an intestinal ischemia ongoing, then you can involve your surgical colleague, and meanwhile you can start anticoagulation. And meanwhile, you can again confirm the diagnosis by carrying out a triphasic CT scan. And also during this situation, if there is no ongoing ischemia, then evaluate them, then if there is another accepted indication for TIPS is present or not. If there is some ongoing indication for TIPS is present, then you can consider for TIPS, but this should be done in a center where however the expertise are available. So not every center will be able to perform TIPS in a patients with portal vein thrombosis, which will be relatively different and the difficult one. So again, if there is a recent thrombosis of a small intrahepatic sub-branches of portal vein, or if there is less than 50% obstruction of main portal vein, then here anticoagulation right away is not needed on presentation. Here, what you can do, you can observe them with serial imaging after every 3 months without therapy. It's a reasonable approach. And if you find any evidence of the progression of clot, then these will be the patients where you need to start anticoagulation. But if this is a recent portal vein thrombosis and the occlusion is 100% or more than 50% of the main portal vein or the mesenteric vein, here you need to start antithrombotic therapy right away, right from the beginning. In case of chronic or complete occlusion of main portal vein, or where there is a cavernous transformation, formation of collaterals, there is no established benefit of anticoagulation or interventional therapy on presentation. So here, what you need to do is you need to target the management of the complications related to portal hypertension. So this is something which will actually you need to remember, that every patient with cirrhosis would not need anticoagulation on presentation. And this is again, now there is enough data is available that band ligations for patients who are having a severe portal hypertension can be performed safely without stopping the therapeutic anticoagulation. And anticoagulation should be initiated as soon as possible, and it should not be delayed. And you should not aim to achieve a variceal eradication or to achieve an adequate beta block, and you should not wait, and anticoagulation should be started right from the beginning. Now the question is, how can we follow the response? So once you've taken a decision to start anticoagulation or not to start anticoagulation, after that, if your patient is clinically doing well, then you can repeat imaging in every 2 to 3 months on therapy. And again, you can decide about the response, whether there is a response to the treatment or not. So if there is a partial regression, you can continue with your anticoagulation and again repeat CT scan into your 3 months duration and see the response to the treatment. If there is a complete response, then consider prophylactic anticoagulation therapy or stop anticoagulation and then follow them with intermittent Doppler examination. So if the treatment response is not there, not achieved, or there is a progression on therapy, then you need to review and confirm the patient adherence. If the patient is compliant with anticoagulation therapy, then you can consider the next step. And the next step would be going for any intravascular procedure or again for the next management step. So the next management step could include thrombolysis and thrombolectomy, which could be the radiological one. And here, when the pharmacological thrombolytic therapy is aimed, the aim is to achieve recanalization, and which actually could help you to achieve some better results in some cases. But on the other hand, as you add one more treatment, the chances of adverse effect associated with the treatment gets high. So lots of people have tried thrombolysis with or without thrombolectomy radiologically after anticoagulation, and but desired outcome were achieved at the cost of having lots of side effects. So that is why, what are the recommendations? The recommendations are local or systemic thrombolytic therapy should only be considered in very selected cases of recent portal vein thrombosis in whom intestinal ischemia persist despite anticoagulation. Okay, so if intestinal ischemia is not there, then you don't need to jump on the next step. So here, if you start them on multiple therapeutic options, then here you can achieve complete recanalization about 50% of cases and partial recanalization in difficult to treat cases in up to 25% of cases. But here goes the complication rate very high as you add multiple therapies. Okay, so now the question is which anticoagulation therapy we can use. So you have vitamin K antagonist, for example, the warfarin, low molecular weight heparin, and direct oral anticoagulation agent, which are these agents which are visible on your screen. So I'm sure you know about the mechanism of action and the doses, and you remember that whenever you start vitamin K antagonists like warfarin, then you need to overlap with low molecular weight heparin. And on the other hand, for example, the most older one, which is the rivaroxaban, then you can start with 15 milligram doses, and the various agents are actually having the different doses. But here, what you need to remember the elimination or the excretion route of these medications. For example, in case of this betrexaban, 85% is actually excreted from the hepatobiliary one. Likewise, edaxaban and apixaban, all of these medications, including dabigatran, they're having a significant excretion route from the hepatobiliary system. So if somebody is having an underlying advanced hepatobiliary disease, you need to be very careful while using these medication in such cases. So better to use medications which are actually having a renal excretion, but not the hepatobiliary system as a major route of excretion. So what does the data says? The data says that you can use warfarin in liver disease cases, and liver disease labeling is actually mentioned as a what you can say a kind of red flag for these direct oral anticoagulant agent, which are actually having an excretion from the hepatobiliary tract. So this review, from where I have taken the chart, this is ASSLD review. And in that review, they've mentioned that rivaroxaban is a kind of contraindication in liver diseases. We're having a child C status especially. But on the other hand, there are many studies available, especially the retrospective study, where the people have used rivaroxaban and found very easy to use. However, the randomized control trials are lacking in this regard. So whenever you'll be using these medication, you need to use them with precaution and utilize them and decide about selection of these agents based upon individual therapy. So the choice of agent for anticoagulation therapy in patients with portal vein thrombosis should be individualized. Therapeutic anticoagulation in patients with cirrhosis appear to have a similar non-portal hypertension related bleeding complication rate as compared to the general population. So this is a good point that, so whenever you are starting them, the risk of bleeding because of portal hypertension related complication and non-portal hypertension related complication are not that high as we were used to hearing or thinking a while ago. So now the research, now the data is actually supporting that this risk is there. This is not that high, so you can use them in patients with cirrhosis cautiously. So again, the data regarding directly, these are the data regarding these oral anticoagulation agent. The portal vein thrombosis data remain limited regarding safety and efficacy of these agents in patients, especially with cirrhosis. So in patients with cirrhosis, caution is advised whenever you'll be using in the presence of advanced disease. So the recanalization rate with anticoagulation is relatively good, which is approximately 40%. So the risk factors identified with not achieving recanalization, the limited data is available about that, but this includes the presence of a splenic vein thrombosis and the detectable peritoneal fluid on presentation. The severity of initial features does not appear to influence the recanalization or protection from the intestinal ischemia. So the recanalization in patients with the cirrhosis, this is again like with anticoagulation is relatively good one. 70% patient can achieve complete recanalization as compared to partial recanalization or complete recanalization, and 53% can achieve like complete recanalization. So in summary, so managing portal hypertension is challenging. No doubt, the data, especially from the retrospective studies and observational studies, has answered many questions. For example, it talked about the indications of when to start anticoagulation, when to go to an additive treatment, for example, the systemic thrombolectomy or local thrombolectomy, and when to go for interventional procedures like TIPS and all, when to select a patient for transplantation in such group of patients. But there are many questions which are unanswered, especially about the utility of these oral anticoagulant agent, the safety profile, and the safety profile of the combination of therapy in complicated diseases. So this is yet an entity where, again, the lots of data and studies are available. There are some ongoing studies which are in a running phase. So probably in a couple of months or couple of years, we will be having more data about these unanswered questions. So I thank you very much for kind listening, and thank you very much. So if there are any questions, I can answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Amna, to be with us. Is there any questions from the floor? Is there any comments from the chairpersons? Thank you. We'll go to the second speaker.
Have a question, Dr. Amna. You mentioned the direct antithrombolytic therapy in patients with cirrhosis. What were the major complications for this patient? You hear me? We can't hear you. Do you hear? Do you hear us? Can you hear us?
Yeah, now I can hear. My mic was like the host unmuted, muted, so I couldn't speak. Yes, so the major problem was like, again, in such group of patients reported in the study was like the tolerability. So the bleeding episodes in patients with child B and child C were not that much, but as it is actually excreted from the hepatobiliary system, especially the rivaroxaban, the older agents, so the people have noticed further decompensation and the worsening in liver function test as well. And in those patients who were like relatively coagulopathic, having deranged INR, the people have observed further worsening of INR, further worsening of hepatic underlying condition, and the tolerability issues. And these were the group of people where the relative risk of bleeding was like more higher as compared to the patient who are having a child's B disease or a child.
سامعاني يا أمنة؟ You listen to me, Amna? You can hear me? Amna, you can hear me? We cannot hear you, Amna.
Okay.
You can hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you can hear me now?
I can hear you, yeah.
Yes,
yeah,
although I would like to thank you for these good lectures, and I am very happy that to see you on this virtual meeting, and I hope to see you very soon, actually, next year as we agree. Okay? So thank you, Amna.
Okay.
And I hope that to see you very soon. Okay, thank you.
Thank
so
you.
Now we will go to the last